James Cook, Buffalo's 3-down back. We're here to discuss that, whether he will be the starter week 1, that and more on the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast, starting right now. Welcome to another fantastic episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco, and today we're talking a little bit about James Cook and his fit with the Buffalo Bills. Before we do, we want to make sure that everybody who's watching this jumps over to Razzball Fantasy on YouTube. We are growing fast, folks, and we would love to have you come on, subscribe. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, be a part of the community. We're excited. We're going to have a great content all off season. Make sure you're also jumping on IG and TikTok at Razzball Fantasy. We have a bunch of daily content going on that site as well. And also make sure you always go to razzball.com to get all the latest information you need to know for hockey, basketball, football, and baseball. Now, I'm bringing on my co-host for today, someone that's near and dear to my heart, someone I've recorded dozens of shows with. His name is Matthew Buck. You can find him at what's the Twitter handle they can find you at, Buck?
At Bucks to 5'9", Justin Zimmer is still not signed with the Buffalo Bills, so
that's a mouthful.
Yeah. So Bob, great to see you, man. Great to see you.
Nice. So Mr. Buck over here and I were co-hosts for a long time on the Fantasy Focused YouTube channel. He's been doing content over there for a bunch of years, and he's someone that we wanted to bring in because he's my go-to Bills guy. So James Cook logically made sense to have you on today to jump on and talk about it. So, Buck, tell the people what you learned about James Cook. How do you feel his fit is with the Buffalo Bills? Is he going to be the starter week 1?
I don't think he's the starter. I think Singletary earned his spot, but I was thrilled with the pick there by the Bills. I think it's a great fit considering we can get something there out of Devin Singletary, which he proved last year. And I think he's done enough to warrant the first shot at it. James Cook will be involved. From a fantasy perspective, I don't think it's going to be all that electrifying with James Cook from a volume perspective and from a production perspective, but I think we're going to see the very start of a very, very good career here, and I think he's actually a good scheme fit for what the Buffalo Bills need. Bills need that pass-catching back, and also he doesn't, there's tons of tread on his tires, Bob, and that's the thing I'm most excited about. He doesn't come in with 4 years of just getting run into the ground, like say an Oklahoma back, something like that. This is a guy who has limited exposure. He's a winner. He's on a national championship team there at Georgia. And, well, he's got great bloodlines. So I'm looking forward to it here for Buffalo, Bob.
Now, when I'm looking at the James Cook situation, I like to look at the player comps first to understand, like, what is player profile, I think, from a measurable standpoint, he looks like. The number 1 comp is Andre Ellington. Now, if you've been around the fantasy football industry for a while, there was glimmers of hope early Andre Ellington in the Bruce Arians offense. There was glimmers of hope, but of course injuries really struck him down, and then of course the emergence of a guy named David Johnson didn't help either. They also linked him to guys like DeAndre Washington, Devonta Freeman. So I guess Freeman became a foundational back. DeAndre Washington never really earned a starting role, and Andre Ellington is more of a passing game specialist. So I guess of those 3 comps, is there one guy that really stands out, or do you think they're all not even a thing?
At this stage, I don't really know what the comp is for him. If it's Andre Ellington, I think from a fantasy perspective for this season, somewhere along those lines, right? I don't think it's going to be anywhere like he's getting the lion's share of the carries. Now, that can all change. Singletary can fumble a ball in game 1 or 2. And that might shift the perspective there for old Ken Dorsey to try and figure out something different. So really it boils down to 2 things. 1, does Singletary get it done early and often? And 2, does Singletary fumble a football again? If one of those 2 things occur over the first 3 games, then Cook's going to get a bigger shot at it. But player comp-wise, really not my specialty. But, if it's Andre Ellington with the early flashes, I'll take that. Limited in terms of the volume he's going to get here this year, but I think he's going to be an effective role player.
Either way, Devin Singletary's contract is up after this season. So
Correct.
Even if he does not become, the starter this year, Zach Moss really couldn't get it done, but he does make a nice compliment to Zach Moss as a 1-2 punch. If he does take the lead, great. But he does seem more of a passing game specialist, probably 1 or 2 in this draft class for running backs in the passing game, for most people say is James Cook. But diving into this a little bit more, some of the things you got to love about his long-term outlook. Number one is Josh Allen. I mean, he's going to have a top 10 quarterback, top 5 quarterback, whether you want to shake it, which way you want to do it. Josh Allen is someone that you want to be tied to, even on the ground game. Yes, Josh Allen doesn't target running backs at a high clip, but at the same time, you're going to have more scoring opportunities. You're going to be on a good offense, so that's always a plus. The other is the offensive line, starting to get a little bit better. PFF ranked them number 17 overall down the stretch of last year after the season. They also added Roger Saffold and David. It basically took the Titans guys and put them on their team because they got the right tackle from Tennessee as well. So I guess from a long-term perspective, is the Josh Allen and the improvements on the line more encouraging for you to take them in dynasty formats?
100%. I actually took James Cook with my 11th overall pick that I had from a trade. First one, I got Olave. Was pretty happy with that. But I got a pairing there, running back, wide receiver. I think late first round is fine for a guy like James Cook because we've been podcasting together now the last year. So you understand, I want him in the right offense. And I think he's in the right offense to be productive with the Buffalo Bills, even if he isn't getting a ton of touches. What he's done with his touches in college has been impressive, but they've been extremely limited. So this is a guy that I think just likes to work hard with a common goal to win something. And if that's the case, and he's getting a bit role here with the offense, possibly the third down back, I think it's in good shape long term for fantasy football players out there, especially in the dynasty format.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I find somewhat encouraging was that this coaching staff has used rookies. They have been with Devin Singletary in 2019, Zach Moss in 2020. To an extent, they have allowed their rookies to earn their roles, and then down the stretches have had bigger second halves. Devin Singletary finishes the RB33 his rookie season. Doesn't sound great, but early on in the season, they earned their role. Same thing with Zach Moss down the stretch of 2020. Yes, it didn't work out in 2021, I know, but he at least started to get more work. He finishes a top 50 back, which isn't anything great, but it's nice to see a coaching staff buy into their rookies enough to give them work down the stretch and let them grow into their role. So to twist this into ADP, now we like to want to make sure we discuss where these players are going. And right now today, James Cook is going 103rd overall in best ball ADP. That's ahead of guys like Ramondre Stevenson and Rojo, and right behind players like Chase Edmonds and Rashad Penny. So what's your thoughts about his current best ball ADP right now at 103?
I mean, it's not crazy in a best ball format, but good Lord, I was not expecting it to be, what is that, 8th round?
9th, yeah. Still high.
Early 9th. That's still high for me. If I'm doing best ball, I'm not looking for a guy like Cook just because I don't know. And that's a little bit early for guys that you at this stage don't know what the level of volume of touches is going to be. So I'm going to kind of wait on him there. I think I'm comfortable like 11th round after I've filled everything out and build a little bit of depth there.
Yeah. I feel the same exact way. I'm not going to touch him at 103 right now. I personally, I just lied. Now I'm thinking about it. This is what I wanted to talk to you about. So I'm all over the place. I just did like an hour-long pod. I'm all over. Anyway, but here's what I want to talk about. We did an episode earlier this offseason called how to basically avoid drafting a bust at running back and what criteria gave us the edge. And one of the things are ambiguous backfields, which results in a low ADP for all the starting running backs. So Singletary and James Cook both have very low ADPs right now. Singletary's 90th overall, and Cook is at 103. So you can essentially take your 9-10 pick and take both guys. They also want them to be tied to good quarterbacks in ADP. Josh Allen, consensus top 3 quarterback, no matter which way you shake it. That's improvement. And then the offensive line, you want a top 20 offensive line in PFF grades. You would think at 17 with Saffold and Quessenberry, whatever how you say his last name, is now on the roster. You think that number might rise. So he checks a lot of boxes for me that I don't care. I might be wrong on one of them, but as long as one hits, that's all that matters. So I might take Singletary and Cook at that 9-10 range and see what happens overall. But let's jump down to Dynasty, Buck. You just said you took him at 11. His current ADP is 12. I guess my question for you is what players are you not going to take him over at the back of the first? Or is he kind of your number one target at the back of the first of dynasty drafts?
Back of the first, he's certainly at the top of the list, right? Because at this point, likely that 3 running backs have been off the board already. And at that point, with a rookie, I'm just going to pick the scheme and the squad. And Bills have both of those things in terms of fantasy production across the board. And you got Devin Singletary. So first round is perfect for me. I do like 2 or 3 of the other situations, but a little bit better than I like James Cook.
Yeah. So basically our website now at Razzball.com, we have consensus dynasty rookie rankings from multiple sites, from Fantasy Pros all the way up to Pro Football Network. So we have a bunch of consensus data. And like some of the players he's going right behind, the Christian Watson, Jahan Dotson, those guys. I mean, Christian Watson is probably, quote unquote, the number one option future for Aaron Rodgers. But number one, we don't know how long Aaron Rodgers will be around. And number two, he still has to perform. Early indications say that Christian Watson is more of an MVS type than a Devontae Adams player. So knowing that, you might want to look at Cook. But then you have Rachaad White. Obviously Rachaad White in Tampa. Leonard Fournette, I know he just signed a new contract, so it could be a year or two. But with Tom Brady potentially being gone after a year or two too, what's his long-term outlook? So I guess in this range, I would be okay. Because Dameon Pierce, you're not going to take a guy at Houston Texans running back over James Cook. I agree with you. I'd rather take the upside of Cook tied with, Josh Allen versus taking a Dameon Pierce, who might have a clearer path short-term to running back touches with Davis Mills. But other than that, Buckles, before we close
Don't disrespect D Mills.
No, I mean, Dave, okay, he's not Josh Allen, so that's what I'm just trying to say.
Correct, yeah.
But he is, listen, I think there's a lot of optimism for the Texans offense in the sense of Davis Mills. It could not have been worse last year. I mean, they had nobody besides Brandon Cooks, a young Nico Collins, a young Brevin Jordan, a hodgepodge of random running backs. They didn't have anything, and he still put up decent numbers. So I think that there is long-term optimism, but I'd rather tie myself to a guy like Josh Allen personally. But before we go, is there anything else you want people to know about James Cook? Anything else you learned in your research?
Not much, man. I think we covered all of our bases here, Bob. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Well, once again, this is the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the actual channel, people. I've been checking Google Analytics, and I noticed that 75% of the watch the videos aren't even subscribed. So shame on you. Subscribe. You get the best takes from guys like Buck when you join this show. But also make sure you're jumping on Instagram and also jumping on IG at Razzball Fantasy and going to Razzball.com for all the latest you need in baseball, football, hockey, and basketball. Also, by the way, I said soccer on the last podcast. We do not do soccer. I am so sorry, everybody. So if you jump on the Razzball.com to check out soccer content, you ain't going to find it. Once again, I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. That man is the Buck, Matthew Buck. We are out of here.